Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the xAPI Fall 2021 party. This is track 2, Getting into the Weeds with xAPI. And we are here today with George Vilches and the REST-TC team. Let's go ahead and get started. And if you were kicked out, do not worry. We will be recording these sessions. So if you did sign up for the videos, you will be getting a copy of this. If you didn't sign up, let me know. I'm happy to send you the proper links. And without further ado, George, take it away.
Great, thank you. And let me bring my share up one more time. Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Are you ready to rock? I'm thrilled to be here as part of the warm-up presentation for the In the Weeds track of the xAPI party. We here at REST-TC Software recently finished the cmi5 Catapult project, an effort funded by the ADL to bring testing and guidance to the learning community to advance cmi5 adoption across LMSs and content creators. And we're wanting to spread the good news about all these things. This is kind of a continuation of our fall talk here at the cohort. Thank you, Megan and team, for allowing us to continue our previous work with you so we can go that much deeper. This path that you've crafted around acquiring xAPI knowledge has been a great boon to the entire community. So what are we going to do today? Since we've already been here talking about the LMS test suite of Catapult and the content test suite of cmi5 Catapult, we've even shown off a little bit of the cmi5 example content. What we haven't done is talk about the way forward. You've got existing content and you've got a modernization problem. As the vast majority of that old content is in Scorm, that's going to be our primary focus for today. So to talk about converting Scorm to cmi5, we're really talking about xAPI as the glue layer, and we'll hit on all three standards, Scorm, xAPI, and cmi5, get a high-level feature parity going. And then to convert these courses, we're going to lean heavily on work already done as part of the cmi5 Catapult project, the test suite and the course examples both. We're going to break the course examples down. We're going to see what parts we're using that we can use for other projects. From there, we'll get a parity between Scorm terms, how they map up to the new standards. And once we've converted terms, we're going to convert some code. We're going to look at the manifests that Scorm and cmi5 use, how the LMS presents the material to the user, and we're going to look at the runtime that captures the learner data itself. These first few slides are going to be a refresher. If you've been in the cohort, you'll have already seen them. I will warn you all ahead of time. This is the deep track, and we're pulling no punches. We're going to be looking at source code as part of this. If you don't normally look at source code, take part. We've done our best to mark out the important parts. You're not going to need to read JavaScript to see what's going on and get the general understanding of the process. Okay, so right off the bat, cmi5. We're in the xAPI working group, or in the xAPI party here. cmi5 is a superset of xAPI. It's a way to make xAPI LMS friendly. It tells a meaningful story about how to take an e-learning module and import it, launch it, and track it in an LMS platform. It can also be viewed partially as we said, superset or an extension of API. As the tracking part collects the learner data, it's mostly contained within rules that can be represented by an xAPI profile. One of the reasons we can have this talk at all is because cmi5 scratches the same itch as Scorm. So it makes sense that we should put effort into trying to upconvert Scorm packages into cmi5. As a quick note, cmi5 is currently on the Quartz standard, and as part of our Catapult project, we are with our Quartz shirts. The Rock is here to make sure I don't get anything wrong. You know, he'll keep me honest as we go through this presentation. Okay, we've got 3 standards in play for this discussion. Let's map out what's functionally unique across them so we can understand what it is we're trying to replace. Here's a quick reminder about Scorm. It's a 20-year-old standard to import, launch, and track learner data on an LMS using a JavaScript connector. That sounds a lot like cmi5, right? There's a reason for that. The negatives here with Scorm, it's got a very specific, and it's a limited data information model. You can track. It works in the context of browser. You can't do mobile apps. You can't do VR. You can't do simulators. There's no data portability. You can't move Scorm data from one LMS to another LMS in a known and sane way. So while Scorm is a decent way to launch from an LMS, to track a very specific set of data, success status, completion status, score, and time, that's the big 4 that most people focus on. It's kind of useless outside of that. And I don't mean to be hard on Scorm specifically, but 20 years, we've had a lot of good ideas since then. xAPI gets a much better transport. It has a huge data model, but it doesn't have a good story for import to an LMS. It doesn't have a packaging story. It doesn't have a launch story. CMI5 comes along and glues those things together and makes that all the more better. Okay, we see the advantages of moving to CMI5, quickly, but it's all those check marks in that third column are there for a reason. When's the right time to think about moving this content forward? Well, there's the easy one. Do you have something that can already launch CMI5? Can you publish to CMI5 with your existing authoring tools? Go try it. That's it. Do you need more data about your learners? If you're doing check-the-box training, no, maybe you don't. But if you want to get into more than that, or you want to have some of the other benefits CMI5 provides, getting more data, getting better launchable experiences, that's a great time to start poking at it. If you are remotely government adjacent, or you just want to keep in line with what the government is doing, the DoD 1322.26, that's a mouthful, is the government telling us use xAPI, use CMI5 is the way forward. That's a good reason all on its own. And then there's my favorite, this last one. If you're getting support requests about pop-ups being annoying and you want to have more control over that experience, CMI5 allows the course designer to make very strong recommendations about we'd like you to not use a pop-up if you can avoid it. Nothing's perfect, but it tries really hard. The most important part of migrating legacy content, though, is always be ready to do it. Keep checking to make sure when the time is right. For us, I think the time's today. So let's get into it. Right off the bat, if you've authored content in regular tools, this is, before we get to the hard stuff, if I've got to do this by hand, there's plenty of Scorm out in the world that was built in one of the well-known authoring tools or around a well-known software framework. If you have these source materials, make your life easy. Start there. Check your tool for CMI5 support. It might be as painless as just republishing the package as a new standard, instead of a major code dive or a content rebuild. Go have a slice of cake for your cleverness. You deserve it. So do you want to see what I mean? I'm sure you do. Articulate Storyline just gave us a really great win last week. Time is hard. We're doing a more in-depth tutorial internally on how to do xAPI statement sending with Storyline. There's now kind of a nice little panel that helps you manage this experience. So I created a button in a Storyline package that triggers a send xAPI statement. There's a simple view where I can just pick my verb, result, and object. And then I'm showing you here the advanced view where you can even get more flexible. And any xAPI statement you can think of, you can craft. And it even supports some custom variable injection, some things that you can take from your Storyline data and jam into the statement. Go to that publish screen. And there it is right there. Articulate Storyline's got the publish to CMI5 moment. The coolest part about all this is now these xAPI statements they said they allowed you to generate, do they come through as CMI5? Let's find out. So here's the Catapult, CMI5 Catapult Content Test Suite, the way that we're going to look at a lot of the courses we look at today. We're going to drive right into testing our Storyline package here. And so when we launch this Storyline package and we get this beautiful button I've made here, I'm going to make us look at the dev console, and I press this button and there's our statement that got sent. And what's cool about the statement that just got sent is not only does it have the bits that we put in, our magic spell, it also has all of the bits necessary to be counted as a CMI5 statement. In this case, because it's not one of the known 9 verbs that CMI5 is composed of, we just have the bits that say, we recognize you're part of a CMI5 session like this. Articulate does that for you. So we're in a moment. If you're building articulate style packages, you can already publish CMI5. You can already get the benefits of all these things. Please go out there and start taking advantage of your tools if you're using them. But what if you're not using those tools? What if you have things that are bespoke, or you don't have control of the publishing tools and they haven't yet been moved forward to CMI5? What are your options for actually making this happen? Well, in order to do that, we've produced a set of CMI5 course examples that have a lot of pieces in them that you might be able to take and go perform these operations yourself. We're going to start by breaking the course examples down in the CTS, and then we'll go to town on how we can use those pieces to actually do this conversion. So we're going to take our trip back into the CTS. Oh, there, by the way, is the CTS proving that we just sent a CMI5 allowed statement from that articulate course. So when we close this out, We can close this out and we'll go back and we'll start on our Introduction to Geology templates. We built 6 course templates, course examples, to show off different mechanisms within CMI5. I'm going to really only focus on one of them because the vast majority of what we're doing today only needs to know about one of them. But we've got single lesson setups. We've got multiple lesson setups. We've even got pre-post test setups for how the content's organized within an environment. When we go into the responsive style, we can look at this course. We can see that it's a course with a single AU. AU is the word that means the launchable piece of learning. And when we hit test here, in the CTS, what we're doing is we're establishing a session for a particular learner taking the particular piece of training. And so now we've established that the learner is able to get in the CTS and do the launching moment. There's ways to configure the learner's experience. There's also ways to configure the way you're launching the experience. Some of these will come in handy in the next few minutes, but right now we're just going to do the most simple, straightforward launch experience. I just press this button and we get launched into this course package. I chose the responsive one on purpose. This is kind of a modern take on a mobile-friendly traditional e-learning view. You've got that normal sidebar that gives you the expectation of traditional navigation. You've got a very flexible content flow in the middle. You've got some pieces of video and other types of media that represent potentially interesting xAPI activities. We're going to definitely dig into those in a few minutes. And you've got the ever asked for simple quiz that everybody needs in order to validate that some portion of the package has been completed, and all of the data that those generate. So you can see here, we generate a bunch of interactions. We can generate statements that talk about how we succeeded at achieving this course material. This is all fine and dandy. These course templates in and of themselves address a lot of the standard e-learning workflows that, a lot of the standard e-learning workflows that you're going to be asked to produce in traditional page turner and slightly beyond page turner content. You can also see by my act of clicking a button that answers all the questions correctly for me, which is our single favorite button in the entire course example suite. So, because when we get to the golf courses, I'll show you why that may not be the case. And when we relaunch, we both have activities around bookmarking, and we have activities that give us controls around whether or not the LMS recognizes that this course has been completed and should not be tracking more data. So we're doing a lot of best practices stuff here, not just around how do we get the data from the learner, but how do we make sure that these courses behave correctly in a wide variety of experiences. We also sneaked in an exit button here because there's multiple ways to exit a course. We've got if your browser window closes, we've got if there's an LMS level control that closes things, and we've got if the course closes things itself. Exit behavior is hard, and we've taken a lot of effort to make exit behavior something that we're extremely sensitive to doing correctly in all cases. CMI5 gives us a lot of great tools to make that work right, but our course has to play nicely with it. It's not a freebie. So this is the general framing of the course. We're going to now take a quick dive into where the course examples can be found and what's inside of them. I here am on GitHub, the probably best version control system currently out there. Go ahead, argue with me in the QA after the fact. But GitHub is the home of all of ADL's public project offerings, and Catapult is in that collection of things. If you come to GitHub, you can look in the course examples, and there will be the six examples we've produced, as well as some reasonable documentation telling you how we built it, what it's structured as, what you might need to use it, as well as a breakdown of each package. Again, we're going to kind of focus on the simplest single example here. So the single AU. The structural components of this is a lot like a layer cake. We start from the outermost. Once you have the manifest that launches the package, we'll get into the CMI5 XML when we start the conversion. You have a single HTML file that drives the entire process and maintains all the content in it. So again, I told you we'll be careful about showing code, but in this one case, we're just blocks of HTML where we took stuff from Wikipedia, and we're very explicit, you see it on the examples. This is all just Wikipedia reformatted into a nice learning package. We took that, laid it out as a collection of HTML blocks and images and videos to drive the structural knowledge content portion of it. And then there are 3 major JavaScript layers that each are responsible for handling a piece of the experience. The course.js is specific behaviors to the way our course looks and functions. So things like menus, things like navigation buttons. If we come down here, we've got navigation buttons. Those are all course behaviors. These are probably not things you're going to be able to take away with you because they're specific to the way we drive the course. Then there's course cmi5.js. This is, as you might imagine, judging by there's a cmi5 and a course, this is the glue between the two. This is our tracking plugin. This helps turn course-like behaviors into cmi5 trackable moments. Handles the things that takes that process from I'm a thing in a browser to I'm a thing being stored in an LRS. And then we've got cmi5 library. This is based on an open source library. You can find on NPM. Alicia has included a link for us at the end of the presentation if you want to go see the source of it. And it's also right here in the documentation that we described here. So these 3 pieces define both raw cmi5 behaviors, mapping from cmi5 to courses, and then how we actually make a course play. All of the courses use the course examples use these 3 files exactly the same. We make no changes across them. And all of the different examples we produce are just different ways of slicing how we initialize those aspects and organize them in a manifest. So with that, what we've done is we've effectively composed a set of examples that are kind of like a low-key authoring tool. Plus, we've kept the pieces independent enough that you should be able to run off and take them and apply them to other courses, but only the parts you need. So not the course, but the tracking plugin and the cmi5.js. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So let's, one last thing before we get into that. You saw that we were generating statements for data that we collect through this process every time we, excuse me, every time we interacted with the video, for instance. Oh, right, we're in read-only mode. I was tricking myself. We can't track new things in read-only mode, and the course intentionally stopped me from doing so. It respected what the LMS told us, and that's part of the tracking plugin's behavior. It takes care of it for you. So my little accident there actually demoed off something important. Let me start a new test real quick. There we go, test, randomize. Okay, now we have somebody who hasn't completed this material. Now, every time we perform a navigation moment, we're generating statements about that. We're also generating bookmarks that are stored as xAPI activity states. So statements are good for marking a moment in time. Activity states are good for marking a changeable record of where you might be in the course. And we're also tracking at the xAPI profile level. As we interact with this video course here, this video item here, we are making xAPI statements that are video friendly. And they follow the xAPI video profile. By doing so, we've actually put in the tracking plugin a model for how you might make communications that are xAPI profile friendly. Maybe a little bit of a bleed over between what's correct and truly pure between all the layers, but it's going to be really instructive for people who are taking these pieces to build them onto their own courses. And with that, back to the deck. So I said layer cake, and I was very specific about that. In some code, the way you think about building software is kind of as a layer cake, components stacked upon one another to provide narrow bands of functionality, abstract away hard details that shouldn't be relevant at a higher level. The cmi5 course examples are really, really nested in this fashion. A single HTML file is the only launch point, contains all of the injectable templates and the initialization code that lays out how the course is organized. It lays out the navigation functions and such, which when we get down to course.js. The tracking plugin, I'm going to call it tracking plugin forevermore, that's course cmi5.js, is the higher level concepts for mapping course logic to cmi5 behavior. And then that open source library for cmi5.js, it does the heavy lifting of speaking cmi5 accurately. And now all of you are hopefully hungry and thinking about cake. If so, I've done my job well. So that tracking plugin, we've already talked about a bit. We're wrapping the raw CMI5 functionality with common use cases. This is the real meat of what we're doing today in the course examples, is teaching you how to build that mapping. This simplifies the average developer's path to using CMI5. It takes out the trickiest bits. How to initialize a CMI5 session. That's several different calls you've got to get in order and hopefully do it in an efficient manner. How do you load and save a bookmark? How do you send several statements at once? And the most common issue, and the one I'm the happiest we got right, is how to correctly exit a course in all the different ways a browser or a tool could exit a course. This is something that happens wrong in a lot of e-learning packages. We also get a little fancy and cheat since we put the xAPI profiles in the tracking plugin, or how you would model an xAPI profile in a tracking plugin. That sort of cheating feels good to me because it's really instructive to all of you. Okay, so we're getting close to actually converting example content template, example content. It's important to get a quick mapping of Scorm to CMI5 terms. I stole this from the CMI5 Best Practices Guide. This is a great book. Alicia Pack knocked it out of the park writing and compiling this. Please go read that book. There is not just CMI5 materials, but there's a lot of xAPI and Scorm things that will help you kind of understand the larger ecosystem, besides helping you understand how to make CMI5 work for whatever role you might be in an organization. So here we go. We have taken our first look at a Scorm package. And every Scorm package, it's a zip file. It contains this imsmanifest.xml that describes the structure of the course. This is the LMS instructions on how to import the course. This is about the simplest version of this file you can have. There's a lot of mess here, right? There's a lot of boilerplate. Don't worry about it. It's not a problem. We don't need to understand what 98% of that boilerplate is. We're just going to move right along. CMI5. When you make a zip pack in CMI5, this is your manifest called cmi5.xml. It kind of looks the same. It looks a lot different. The boilerplate is different. Again, don't worry about it. The average single SCO course, which is what almost every authoring tool in the world produces, isn't going to need much work to go from a Scorm manifest to a CMI5 manifest. In the general case, you could just take the CMI5 XML that we have in the examples, specifically the single responsive or framed AU example, just move the values I've marked here from the Scorm side to the CMI5 side, one for the title, one for the launch piece. In this case, there's no mastery score in the manifest. This course decides its status based on score. Our own tracking plugin can be clever about mastery score if one is provided. It's often a very small improvement that you can make on the original Scorm course when you're doing the conversion to give people who import the course more control over what it means to pass this course. Mastery score is probably the most common thing twiddled within Scorm manifest, so we assume that it's a feature worth pursuing further, and we'll get a little bit more to mastery score later. Okay, that's it. That's the manifest. Super, super easy, no problem. Then we start talking about the runtime. I also stole this grid here from the Best Practices Guide. Go read the Best Practices Guide. Love the Best Practices Guide. It's so good. Please, a lot of your questions are already answered in there. These are some of the most common Scorm 1.2 commands that you'll find, and you'll need to convert to CMI5 calls. There's the session containers. That's your initialized and finish, also called terminated. This brackets the runtime lifecycle of a course. There's completion, there's success state, which map to the statements with these specific verbs. And there's bookmarks, which map to activity states. These mappings, they aren't really too bad. It's almost like the people who built CMI5 took a look at the past ideas and, tried to iterate on some of the good parts. They did. I've warned you this was coming. We're going to walk through the contents of a real course. We're going to look at actual code snippets. In Scorm packages, there's always terrors lurking beneath the deep. They've had plenty of time to fester. It's been 20 years. There's no greater cure than to bring them to the light. Let's shine our light on them and give them some healing CMI5 treatment. Okay, what Scorm package should we pick to do this with? Well, if you've been in the learning industry for a while, there's a pretty good chance you're going to recognize the artifact here. This relic of a bygone era. This was found chiseled in stone tablets. The Scorm golf course has been used worldwide as an instructive asset for generations of developers. I don't know how long a generation is. It's probably generations. Take a look at that screenshot. Guess what version of Firefox that came from? I'll give you 5 seconds. So I did some archaeology with Google. It's most likely Firefox 3.5. That's like a 2009 version of Firefox. And I just yesterday got confirmation internally that these golf courses most likely were built somewhere around 2008, 2009. This is a great resource for us to prove out the model and how to convert Scorm content, because so many packages themselves are model off techniques that were presented in the golf packages. Okay, so while the rock here is the CMI5's patron saint, we're going to need a more Scorm era helper to give us the step-by-step walkthrough of what we're going to do. Patrick Duffy, this is on you. So you got to start identifying what versions of Scorm the package supports. While the conversion job is very similar between a Scorm 1.2 course and a Scorm 2004 course, the differences are meaningful and risky. I've chosen this golf course as the Scorm 1.2 version. It only supports Scorm 1.2 commands. There's no clever plugin architecture. So you're going to find where all the Scorm commands are used. Maybe you can have cmi5 live happily side by side, or you're going to do a replacement. And you're going to look at all the different Scorm keys that might be in there, and you're going to see, do we have just all the easy ones, bookmark, status, score? Or do you have fancy ones like objectives where your life's going to get way harder? And then go to your best practices guide. The CMI5 best practices guide has all of those different mappings already, most all of those different mappings in there for all the normal things that you might want to convert. Here we go, real code. This won't take that long, I promise. It will. So to get started, we're taking the bits of the CMI5 example content templates that are useful for this particular project, and we're going to inject them into the main player page of the Scorm Golf example and initialize them. It's a nice, easy start. So let's take one quick look at what the golf example is and see what it looks like when the initialize experience happens. So there we go. In here, at this moment, we've already initialized the course. We've set up, if there was any bookmarking to happen, we've got this thing going. I'm going to go ahead and just show off the golf course. You can see there's a lot of like old style design things happening. We're inside a frame of a frame. We've got some navigation moments here that, are relics of old style designs. And then we've got the quiz that you have to fill out every single field on, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to fail. I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm going to set my answers. We get a bunch of Scorm tracking moments here. It's hitting all those same things that you see in the CMI5 examples. And when I hit exit, it actually tries its hardest to do something nice about getting out of the course in a reasonable way. And I did a terrible job at answering the questions. A quick relaunch moment just to prove that not only are we addressing content flow and initialize and finish, we're also addressing bookmarks. And it brings us right back to the quiz where we failed ourselves. With that, let's keep on going now with what the code conversion process looks like. Here we go. We're ready to initialize. And already we've got a small JavaScript hiccup. What's going on right here? What's that post-init thing? The tracking plugin, when you do initialize, modern development does a thing called callbacks. It might also be called promises. They're kind of the same thing. Don't worry about the details. In the modern world, everything's asynchronous for JavaScript when you're talking to external systems. Scorm was built in a time when everything was synchronous. You could just wait until it was done and it would come back and you could keep going on. So we've got the tracking plugin doing this clever initialize thing that handles it all for you. Scorm also has some super weird rules. One of them was if you start a course and you don't ever set a lesson status, it will complete the course when you exit it the first time, no matter what the learner actually got to. So CMI5 just says, go do away with that. That's not a good idea at all. We only have a status when you set a status. Then we've got bookmark, fetch, and get. So on the fetch and set, on the get side, you'll notice that everything here looks exactly the same, minus the call for the tracking plugin. This is hiding a bunch of clever xAPI activity state communication. And we've styled it to be as close as possible to the way old style bookmarks work, but with a modern JavaScript approach. So we're hiding all these details for you. And on the save side, we're hiding all these details for you. We've tried to keep it as close to what you would have imagined doing it from the Scorm perspective. Now here's where things start to get more interesting. When you complete a course, whether successfully or not, CMI5 has an expectation that you track your scores and your statuses together. The scores are most often layered within the same passed or failed statement. If your Scorm score saving is kind of far away from your success status saving, you may have to do some more awkward code rearranging to get things right. In the golf examples, we're lucky. Everything's nice and together. So you can kind of see, we set the pass status on the Scorm side, we call the pass status on the CMI5 side, and we cheat. We broke the abstraction. We have, if you look towards the bottom, it says tracking plugin.cmi5.failed. We're going straight to the CMI5 plugin to get the thing that we want. This is, from a programmer's perspective, bad practice. I would be punished as a code review if I actually delivered this as for a proper product, but it shows that we made it so that people trying to get their hands around this don't have to be limited by strictly what the tracking plugin's done for them. You can go ask the CMI5 plugin directly to do the easy stuff, like if you just need to pass or fail. Okay, look, interactions are a mess. Interactions have always been a mess. We're not going to focus on this. It's in the deck for the future when you want to get into the details of something you might be doing. Just know there's mostly, sort of, kinda, and okay mapping, and we're going to move on. Okay, termination is one of the most interesting and challenging parts of getting a session correct. Scorm has a really complicated story around what happens in termination. There's all these rules around attempts, resuming, resetting attempts. We do a simulacrum of that, which is really just, if they say they want to resume, we leave the bookmark in place. And if they say they want to reset, we get rid of the bookmark. That's it. You don't have to do all the other fancy dancing that Scorm requires. CMI5 made that way easier. It also, with our tracking plugin's help, made exit way easier. Now, I'm cheating. No straight cheating. The duration that how long the course has been playing for, it's all hidden inside the CMI5 plugin anyway. So we, in the tracking plugin, are mostly just managing exit behaviors. When you leave a course, where do you redirect to? Where do you go to? The finish and terminate that's attached to that process. So we get rid of a lot of Scorm boilerplate code because CMI5 has better models for managing it. Here we go. The rock is ready to give us his golf instruction. Let's take this converted Scorm course into CMI5 and see it play in Catapult. Proof that we actually made this all come together. And we have our Golf Explained CMI5 course. We'll start a test on that. And we'll get that launched. And here we go. It's still the same material. As I navigate my way through it, you can see that we will be setting a bookmark, an xAPI activity state, on every navigation over and over and over again, as we should. This is what we've intended for this course. We want to bookmark at every moment. I'm also going to go straight to the interactions at the end. And my favorite improvement is I couldn't answer this quiz anymore. I needed a button to answer this quiz for me. Obviously, you don't release like this, but boy, it makes testing this content easier. And that's why we included it in the CMI5 examples. So we'll come down here, we'll submit our answers, and take a look at all those xAPI statements we just generated. Plus, we just generated a pass statement that says we've completely achieved this material. So whether I press this exit button here, or I close the CTS here, we will get the conformance status of the course. And there you go. We've got that this golf course that we've converted from Scorm is now CMI5 conformant. Ta-da! All right, so that's it. This is easy. It was all done, right? No problems. Okay, so we kind of dodged some of the gnarlier parts of what Scorm to CMI5 conversion can look like. There's a few more things that are hard. Success status and completion status have a lot of rules in Scorm, or have a lot of rules in CMI5 that don't exist in Scorm. And you can go crazy with setting these over and over again in Scorm. And CMI5 says only do it this way. So make sure your course has controls to prevent you from resetting it. There's some stuff about mastery score. There's definitely some stuff about sequencing that's not going to convert in the same way. Just be aware that these are things and be sensitive to, if the time comes when you're doing these conversions, these are obvious things to watch out for. Besides just converting the name of one thing to the name of another thing. The cohort has now, over the couple of presentations we've done, seen all the tools and the content pieces in some depth. The one I want to call out the most for today's use case is the best practices guide. I cannot sing this praises enough. I'm a broken record here. Please, please, please check out the best practices guide. Thank you, Alicia, so much. There's something for literally everyone in the best practices guide if you're anywhere near learning. Okay, you're going to want to get going right away with CMI5. Here's content tools, here's applications and LRSs that might have CMI5 support already in them. There's also a little bit of, the CTS Catapult is available for you to go stand up an instance today. There isn't yet a public instance. Hopefully that will all be worked out one day, that it would make sense to have public instances for these, but it's Docker. And while Docker may sound scary, there's gonna be a presentation later today on groups within the cohort who've gotten the CTS running and the troubles they went through and how the CTS has improved through their help. So thank you to that entire group for helping us understand what we needed to do to make Catapult better. It's been, we've already made changes and there's a few more changes to make it even easier for everybody to adopt. There's lots of other resources to work from. I showed you the GitHub repo. There's a CMI5 working group. Please come to the working group. Tell us what your problems are. Tell us the things you're struggling with or the things that you're having great success with. It helps guide the direction that CMI5 is going and the tools that we build around CMI5. So as the rock watches over all of us and leaves us wondering just what type of rock he is, thank you so much for all your time. As we always say here, ask us anything, and you can start right now. If you put your questions in the chat, we'll go through answering them. Thank you so much. And let's see. I think I have Alicia and Tara helping me pull questions together. Is Catapult hosting anywhere, or do we need to run it ourselves locally? So as I wrapped up that towards that last slide there, as far as I'm currently aware, no one has made a public instance of Catapult. It's multi-tenanted, which means that you could make a public instance of Catapult and then make it available for people to register and sign up. No one's just taken that on yet. If you think you might want to be the person to take it on, please reach out to us. Oh, thank you, Florian. The ADL is hosting Catapult now. I'm very happy to hear that. All right, what else do we have? What is in a statement that distinguishes a CMI5 statement versus an xAPI statement, tracking a learner action? And so, Duncan, I get to crib from you first that there was already a context template that identifies a statement as CMI5 allowed or CMI5 defined. I'll go show you just a bit more about that. So we'll go back and we'll launch this golf example. And we'll generate some answers. Oh, that button has come in handy so much already. Okay. Oh, right. I have been stopped because I already completed the course from sending any new data. We didn't add the bar in this one to let users know that we're in review mode. So I have to make a new test. That's twice in the same demo. You think I get better at this by now. All right, here we go. And we launch it. And now I have to scoot my way all the way to the end. And we select our answers and we submit our answers. Okay, so if we look at an xAPI statement, we look at this payload here. The bit that makes it CMI5 from an LMS's perspective, one, is that it has a session ID. That CMI5 session ID is one of the most important parts of that. Two, there are some rules around what goes in the category and the context. Because this statement was a past statement, it's CMI5 defined because it has a context activities category of this very specific category. If it doesn't have that, but it has the extension session, that means it's CMI5 allowed. That's a gross simplification of the real rules, because there's other things that are required, like ID is required for a CMI5 statement. Result has very specific rules. But these are probably the single most obvious tags that you can hang your hat on that says this is a CMI5-esque thing. So let's see, do we have other questions? Duncan also pointed out that content must read the return URL as part of the exit process. And that's the #1 problem that's in CMI5 development. And that is exactly why in the tracking plugin, I'm going to cheat. I said I was going to do only minimal code diving. I'm going to take one more trip into here, and I'm going to go straight down to the exit stuff. So when we look at the exit stuff, we're handling all the ways after termination that you might need to interact with the LMS. We have matchers for the return URL that will make sure that the window or pop-up or whatever may need to be is correctly targeted and redirects us out of the experience. And in that way, anybody who's using our course examples or the templates we built from the course examples will be able to get the exit behavior handled for them. And so this is something that courses should not make mistakes on anymore. Yes, if you don't use our tracking plugin, you have to go and do it yourself and do it right. But there's so many ways now that we're talking very specifically about this to make sure it is done right. And the cmi5 Catapult cmi5 Catapult content test suite tests for it. It's one of the things it shows as part of the exiting procedure in the event log. So you can verify whether or not they're doing the redirect process correctly. If I hit exit here, you get this return URL loaded. And that return URL loaded, because it took us to this custom page, is a control that lets you know that the course exited in the way it was supposed to. If it doesn't do that, you won't get this experience, and you'll know that something is very wrong about what happened. From Florian, we've mentioned Docker. Is there a Docker image of Catapult available on Docker Hub? There is not yet. The CTS, Catapult, and each piece of Catapult is provided as actually multiple Docker containers. So it actually requires a tool called Docker Compose to set up all those containers on your local machine. You can do this with just Docker. You don't need anything else. But because it does require multiple different Docker containers, the model we're recommending to people is, if you're not finding one that's out running in the world, thank you, ADL, that you run Docker Compose. There's instructions right here on how to get started with that. Just make your environment file, run the one command right here, and it should do everything for you. We've been tweaking this over time. The one other rule that I want to be very explicit on, the CTS is not a learning record store. It requires a functional learning record store to fully test this out. So make sure you bring your learning record store to the party, and you'll bring your learning record store, put it in right here, and then you can start up the CTS, and that's that. So yes, you do need Docker, the Docker toolchain to run the Docker Compose. That will set everything up on your local machine. All right. I believe that's the rest. That's my time, and that is all the questions we have outstanding. Thank you all so much for letting the Rock give you this presentation, and we look forward to the next cohort. Take care, everybody.